Hello YouTube, welcome back. This is my annual property report for macadamia farms in the Northern Rivers for 2024. And it's October, the flowering's finished, the trees are looking good, the farms are preparing to put their manure out on the ground, and of course some farms are for sale. I initially decided to do this report every October because traditionally October is the selling season in real estate, but that was just me applying my Sydney brain to the problem. And for macadamia farms, they can come onto the market any time of year. I'd argue that the best time of year to sell a macadamia farm is probably autumn, because you can get the harvest in, not have to worry about who's doing the harvesting and who gets the money for the harvest. But look, in spring there are farms for sale, including this one that I'm looking at here now. And I thought I'd start this report where the macadamia industry started, here in Rous Mill. And on Crawford's Lane here, there is a lovely farm up for sale. It's got about 3,500 trees on 9 by 5 metre spacing. From what I can see, the trees are reasonably mature, but the farmer's been getting a good crop, and it looks like a serious macadamia farm. Also owns that patch of trees that I'm looking at now over the road. The farmhouse itself is absolutely lovely, and you can really see some work gone into it. The ad for the farm didn't have a price guide, but I contacted the real estate agent and it's guiding between 2.6 and 2.8. Look, from what I can see, that sort of a price for, about 3,500 tree farm on a reasonably good size of land, look, it seems realistic. Certainly not a bargain price, but you wouldn't expect one for a farm that's producing very well with a lovely house like that. And in the Alstonville Plateau, you're not seeing a hell of a lot come onto the market right now. What you are seeing is some farms that are coming onto the market and staying on the market because there hasn't been too much interest in those properties. But this one, I think, will probably go reasonably quickly. About 55 acres of mostly macadamia farm, not a whole lot else, but it is in a lovely setting. Let's move on. And I've stopped at this farm, not because it's for sale, but I just happened to come across it. It's on Molly's Grass Road in Tregeagle. And I've often talked to you about row farms where every second row of trees has been removed, but here's one where it's just happened, and you can see wood chip literally everywhere, and you can see the stumps of the trees that have been removed in every second row. And that's the kind of rehab that can get done if you do buy one of these older farms and want to rejuvenate it and hopefully restore some cropping. You can see the big tall narrow trees that have been fighting for sunlight. Now they're going to get room to grow sideways and hopefully regenerate some crop along the sides of the trees. But yeah, just after the operation's been performed, it all looks like a bit of a brutal landscape. But in this case, I'm sure it's for the best. Okay, on with our hunt. Now, speaking of a place where you might want to remove every second row, welcome to Dunoon. There's a lot happening in the Dunoon market, and I think a lot needs to happen. There's a lot of very old established macadamia farms, some of which were very overplanted, and I've seen farmers bulldozing trees and starting again, or bulldozing trees and planting something else. But there's also a lot of farms for sale in Dunoon, and there's about 2 of them in a row, or not quite next to each other, on Dunoon Road, right near Macadamia's Direct. Very similar statistics. They've got about 42 hectares, so the classic 100-acre farm. And on those farms, they managed to have squeezed in 11,000 trees each. Now, 11,000 trees into 100 acres. Look, I'm not handy with the maths, but that is a hell of a lot of trees for that size land. And you can see from just the gateway of this particular property, there's no ground cover. The trees are clearly struggling against each other for light. And even with that many trees, getting a crop would be quite inefficient, because feeding 11,000 trees, even if you get, say, an 80-tonne crop, your cost factor is going to probably eat into too much of that. And when the macadamia price crash happened, it was farms like these that were the first to make losses, because you couldn't just ignore the cost factors anymore. They started creeping up and biting you. So I in fact looked at this particular property, which is for sale again now. It was for sale last in about 2019. I don't know what it's going for. It was a reasonably attractive price back in 2019, but the agronomist I sent in said, look, it's too much for you. And in hindsight, I agree with him. But for those who want a big farm and something that has some rehab, these farms in Dunoon, don't turn your nose up at them, because there are some decent bones to some of these places. There can be some good soil. It's a bit variable on some of these properties that are a bit hilly, because you'll find that the soil coverage can be, thick in some areas and thin in others. But so in the Dunoon market, there is a bit for sale, and this property and one at 1248 Dunoon Road are examples of that. You'd want to buy a farm like this with plenty of money left over to do the rehab, and a bit of patience to let the farms then recover and let the big crops come in. You could continue farming them how they are, but with limited returns for your money, it would be hard to make a profit with them in their sort of condition as they are for sale. Okay, on with the next one. Now here's a pretty sight. Off in the distance you can see a lemon myrtle farm, which is on the corner of the Channon Road. Quite a huge lemon myrtle farm, and interesting to see what that looks like. But in the closer foreground, of course, we're back to macadamias, and this is an interesting contrast to the one I just showed you. Same size, about 42 hectares, but in this case, only 6,800 trees. And this farm's been obviously well looked after. The trees look like there's some A varieties in there, or if not, they're Hawaiians that have been kept to a reasonable height. Like a lot of Dunoon, there's some sloping land, but the farm's clearly been quite well maintained. Has a decent 4-bedroom house on it, and I'd say it's really like one of the other farms there, but the work's already been done. Now, we know what this farm went for, because it sold in April 2024 for 2.98 million. And that seems like, for the price, it could be okay. But that's the kind of money that a Dunoon farm of, around about 100 acres goes for, if the trees are in good condition and the farm's in a position to obviously make you some money. Given the current macadamia prices. So, interesting. On with the next one. But what if you want something a little bit cheaper? Well, right near Dunoon in Dorby, there's a property here that's about 17.5 acres, and it's got 2 houses, a pool, a few other mod cons. The houses probably aren't in that luxury league. And on that 17.5 acres, they managed to have about 2,000 macadamia trees. Now, you can see some of them here. From the aerial photos I've seen, the trees are very varied for some reason. Some of them seem to be doing much better than others, even within the same row. So something's a little strange about how those trees have been managed, although the ones I can see from the road here don't have anything particularly wrong. Looks like, again, every second row might have been removed in this orchard in order to provide those existing old trees with a bit more space. What's it selling for? Well, they're going to try and send it to auction, but its guide is 1.45 to 1.55 million. And you might think for a place with 2 houses and some trees, about 2,000 trees, that's a pretty good deal. I guess it all depends on some of the details, and you'd need to look into the property a little bit more carefully, particularly the tree health and what's going on there, to see how much of a deal it is. Dorby itself is very quiet. There's no sort of local shops or anything. It relies on Dunoon and then Lismore for its culture. And Missingham Road, which is where this property is a bit of a goat track. They're doing some road work on it at the moment, but it's quite charming and a very quiet area up in the hills area in the north end of the Northern Rivers, and something to consider if you I think really want some solitude and to get away from it all. Once you move from Dunoon and Dorby and Modenville and places like that up to the Rosebank federal area, you reach the so-called bohemian district for macadamia farming. That's a phrase coined by one of my friends, Sam, who you might get to meet one day. And up here on the border of Rosebank and Repentance Creek, there were 2 farms for sale. One just sold in October 2024, but the price hasn't been disclosed. Interesting farm that. It had a few macadamias, but one of its main features is it had a NBN tower, which provided a lease fee of something like $20,000 or $25,000 a year just for having the tower on your property. And as a result of that, you also get some fairly good NBN internet, I suspect. But arguably the better farm is across the road, and it's been for sale for a little while. Brushbox Farm here, and it's a farm mentioned by Peter Fraser in a video I did with him as a farm that's had all the work done in terms of rehab. It's one of the older farms in the Rosebank area, but it had some regenerative pruning, soil work and everything else. And just looking in from the gate here, it does look like the farm's been beautifully looked after. Apparently the owner had long-term plans and rehabilitated the farm for those plans, but now has to move overseas. And so it's up for sale. Fairly large farm. I don't know quite how many trees offhand, but it's been on the market for a while. And in fact, around this area, there have been farms that have been on the market for quite a long while. And 3 years ago, when I did a report, I started it off at 15 Armstrong Road. Beautiful farm, absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's still for sale. And so, you have to wonder whether it's the buyer's not offering enough or the seller's wanting too much. Obviously, I'm not going to offer an opinion myself. All I can say is that those farms, and look, I like the look of this Brushbox farm. These are good places and in a lovely, idyllic setting. So something, if you're interested in the area, to definitely make inquiries about. Just recently, Domain, a popular real estate site in Australia, put up an article proposing that Federal is the most desirable destination for a tree change in all of Australia. And it made a few arguments. Some of them were convincing, maybe some of them a little less so, but it's accessible to the beaches, to the hinterland, and there's some beautiful properties for sale, including this one at 202 Federal Drive. And it's very much on the tourist trail. The roads are well maintained, and it really is quite accessible. And through this windbreak of eucalypts, you can see some really quite decent macadamia trees that have been planted, I'm told, on a 10x5 spacing, which is a nice lot of wiggle room, particularly when you're working with older trees like this has. It's about 3,500 trees, and what seems to be a pretty nice house, shed, sort of cottage arrangement, and a fairly flat block of land leading down to a creek area at the end. That's quite charming. And the price it was guiding at on the agent that had listed it, I think they've recently changed agents, but it was guiding around about the 3 million mark. And for a property in this area of Federal, that's sort of understandable. There's a bit of a premium to be paid once you start heading closer to the coast. And, you know, Federal does have a certain charm about it. It's got the Doma Cafe, and when you can find some flat land in Federal, there's not much of it. It's on the edge of the Eureka Plateau, essentially. But when you can find some flat land like this that's good for agriculture, those properties usually are and should be tightly held. So, well worth a look. So here I am outside the idyllic Harvest Cafe, and just picked myself up a loaf of sourdough, which is absolutely beautiful, and walking back down the road. Now, before I leave the topic of that house, that farm at Federal, I just want to point out that historically that sold in 2015 for just on $1 million. And if they can get $3 million 9 years later in 2024, that's a return of about 300% over the 9 years, or 33% per annum. Now, I'm not going to suggest that properties in the Northern Rivers will always go up by that much, but I'm just pointing out the history. Certainly a reasonable rate of capital return. And that's without knowing, of course, what's been done to the houses or the farm or anything else. But worth bearing in mind, because, you know, a macadamia farm hopefully isn't just a function of income, but also a function of capital return. But if you want everything and want to live close to the beach and easy access to the airports and all that sort of stuff, Newrybar, Brooklet, Fernley, those sorts of areas are really sort of regarded as the premium high end. And there are macadamia farms there. Some of them, you know, if you're really lucky, you can get a view of the ocean out one window and a view of the mountains out the other. There is nothing currently on the market for those buyers, except perhaps for one property. And in about a 100 metre walk or 200 metre walk from the Harvest Deli, I'm going to show it to you. It's about 8 hectares. There's 2,500 macadamia trees and nothing else. Now, at the moment, the land doesn't have a building entitlement, although the real estate agent assures me that that would be fairly easy to get. Look, on an 8 hectare parcel, it's probably right, but it's definitely zoned rural at the moment. Now, in his words, the trees are dormant. The farm hasn't been actively farmed for a while. This property's been on the market for a while. So 8 hectares, it's on the corner of the Hinterland Way, which is the old Pacific Highway, and the real old Pacific Highway that leads up to Newrybar. And the trees are all meshed over, probably need a bit of pruning. Looks to me like they're all old Hawaiian varieties. Not that there's anything especially wrong with that. And the land is fairly flat. So if you wanted to rehabilitate it as a macadamia farm, I suppose you could. And you could plonk a house on it somewhere. What's it going for? Well, the vendors want $4 million. And this is really another demonstration. And if you've seen my previous videos of the macadamia farm market, this kind of area does demand quite a large premium compared to ones that are further inland. So even Federal with $3 million, there's certainly a lifestyle trend factor in that. But it's next level when you're looking at places like Newrybar, Brooklet, even Fernley, places that are going to get you to Byron Beach nice and quickly, and also, get yourself a sea breeze, which I'm feeling right now. So what's the take on all this? I don't see a lot of new farms coming onto the market. Really what I'm seeing is a lot of things that have been on the market for some time. They're starting to be picked up, but the supply of farms coming onto the market does seem to be drying up, with a couple of exceptions in, say, Dunoon, where the farms sort of need work. I think that's largely a product of the macadamia price. It's heading back up again, and people are developing a bit more optimism in returning to macadamia farming for income. And where you need to look if you're buying in the market is you need to look at how much work a farm might need in order to get up to a good income earning potential. Or you buy a farm that already has maximised earning potential. That's something that costs relatively less to maintain at that top level and produce income for you in an environment where we're expecting, but not guaranteeing, that the macadamia price is going to continue to rise after a very low drop in 2022. So I hope you enjoyed that little tour of the Northern Rivers. I've certainly done the rounds, and I'm going to be on my way, and I've got no excuses to avoid farm work anymore, so back to it. I'll be in touch again very soon. There's heaps more to tell you. Bye for now.